Good morning, Revolution, and welcome to our show this morning. Everybody on YouTube and Twitter and Facebook land, happy to see you. Rosanna and Anita and Eric Brooks is going to be joining us shortly. Scott is taking the day off. Well, a lot has happened during the course of the week. A week ago, 6 days ago, people got up in the morning, had their coffee, had their Cheerios, cornflakes, sausage, scrambled eggs, drove to the supermarket and in Buffalo. And oh my goodness, something terrible happened. We're going to be talking about that. Primary results in Ohio, Pennsylvania, and other states. A little bit about the economy. After all, we are Marxists, and it looks like the labor market's really tight. And they say that that's good news for the working class. We'll see. And then finally, Scott's favorite president. Uh, I shouldn't talk about Scott when he's not here. Mr. Biden, Scott's homeboy, is relaxing some restrictions on Cuba. I'm sure the Cubans are very, very happy about that. But let's get started. Eric, welcome. We're happy to see you. Buffalo, great replacement theory, Nazism, fascism. Uh, the commission talked about this a little bit. Eric, what can be done to stop these massacres, in your opinion?
So, in my opinion, I think that there's a lot going on with these massacres. There's a lot of links to fascist ideology and fascist movements in this country that are rising. I think that one of the things that we can do is build movements for democracy and movements that demand an anti-racist solution to problems that are addressing our communities, and also movements that challenge the fundamental ideology that whites are being replaced, that the that the that whiteness is fragile and needs to be protected against immigrants or other or black folks or other oppressed minorities that are growing populations in our country, and so coming out for the June 18th Poor People's Campaign is one step forward in challenging these kinds of ideologies and strengthening democracy in our country um, and the struggle for dignity of all workers, including Black people and immigrants.
What about the guns themselves, Rosanna? I mean, I think I don't know where the guy bought this gun, but they were able to enhance the magazine so that it became a weapon of mass destruction. Is gun control part of the solution?
Um, I don't know if that's really the solution. That's really going to solve the problem that motivates people to go out and kill others in that way. Um, Certainly, I know there's a lot of killings that happen in the home because people have guns in their homes and aren't careful with them and all of those kinds of things. But in terms of mass massacres like this, I think it has to be dealt with in the ideological level. We have to tell people that there's no threat to anyone. We have to work together to solve the problems that are really plaguing us.
Rosanna and Anita, Mr. Biden gave a speech in Buffalo the other day, and he condemned racism. That's part of the ideological struggle, Anita. You think that's going to help? We can't hear you. Still can't hear you. Well, Rosanna, to Anita's question, did you Biden gave that speech. He made a very strong condemnation of racism and hate. You know, standing on the bully in front of the or behind the bully pulpit. And do you think that's going to help?
I think it's a step, but I think he needs to condemn those that are really pushing these kinds of ideologies and really address the false narrative that they are spewing.
And that means the Tucker Carlsons and
Yes,
the other talking heads who are pushing this hate.
yep,
Um, and then you could take a look at the board of directors of the big arms manufacturers and so on and so forth. Um, but I mean, I don't know. Lynching has been taking place for many years, decades, over 100 years, Eric. And while it's abated somewhat, we're still getting killed. So, what do we do about it? I mean, what about community self defense? Is that a solution? Some people are advocating picking up the gun. What do you think?
So my thought on that is no. um, I live in Indiana, so I can't argue against gun ownership in any kind of realistic way because it's so prevalent both in the black community and in the white community. But I don't think that guns are a solution. The issue is systemic racism. The issue is systemic capitalism. So the ideologies are leading to organized militias being created, to police doing um, continuous killings of black folks, which is a form of legal lynching today. Here in Indiana, there was a guy who was walking to go fishing in a lake, and a group of white folks um, threatened to lynch him, to hang him from a tree uh, in the area that he was walking through. There's a lot of both individual and organized racism that we have to address, and violence. And there's also the what I'm calling intra-community violence, which is comes out of the economic struggles of oppressed communities. So I think that we need to look systemically across a wide variety of issues that all come down to democratic struggles. So we have to focus on building movements that demand peaceful communities where people can evolve in healthy ways. And I also think that we need to um, understand the relationship between these movements and electoral politics, because at the end of the day, the point of a movement is to affect change. And if we want to affect that change, a dimension of that is the electoral struggle in this country. So, so we need to run candidates. We need to understand that we need to change what democracy looks like in this country so that we have more people's democracy, not corporate democracy or bourgeois democracy, which is, and that takes a huge amount of organizing at the grassroots to affect those kinds of changes and build those kinds of movements. Um, the other last thing I want to mention was the building of organizations that fight for community power. And there's a variety of those kinds of organizations working on the ground, one of them being the National Alliance Against Racist and Political Repression, which is leading the struggle for community control of the police. That's a fundamental democratic change where communities can take over control of the police department. And that's an example of one way of challenging the status quo and building an anti-racist power base for moving forward.
Okay, is Anita back? Not yet. Let's move the agenda a little bit and talk about our the midterms. Primaries took place last week and this week. Um, Rosanna, still there? I don't know what happened
I'm
to
still here, yeah.
Eric and Anita. It's just you and I holding it down.
I'm
Okay.
Uh,
still I'm still here.
are you still there? Okay, good.
Yeah.
The primaries, Democratic and Republican primaries are at full steam. And they had election in Pennsylvania, I think this week, and last week in Ohio. And these extreme right wing candidates are winning the day, Rosanna. And the most, I think, uh, I don't know which one was more to the right, but all of those who are running seem to be playing to the base. Uh, do you think that that's going to get them elected in the general election, Rosanna?
Well, I hope not. I think, a lot of it depends on us in spreading the word of the importance of people going out to vote. We are really the majority, but we have to get out there to the polls and vote. If we don't, then it seems like they're the majority and they're not. But we have to get folks out to the polls, no matter how hard they're making it. And that's another reason why we should point out that voting does matter. If it didn't matter, there wouldn't be so many suppression laws. And so I think that tells you that voting is really important and key to getting what the working people of this country need. And good legislators that are going to represent us, the workers.
Are you witnessing the same kind of far right pitches in Indiana, Eric?
Indiana is viewed as a Republican state, but I have to say that it supported Obama in 2008. So there's opportunity here if there's organization. So there's been an ongoing conflict between the most democratic centers of the state and the state house, where they're constantly undermining the democratic ability of people to vote change at the local level. And that's a real problem where you have a minority that is undermining democratic struggle by removing the ability of localities to make changes to, for instance, school board funding or even what is the definition of a particular municipality, where they are breaking off black areas from white areas and making new municipalities so that they can have people elected from the white areas. There's heavy gerrymandering, and so there's a lot of struggles here. There was a very interesting primary where um, there were some progressives that were elected at the bottom of the Democratic Party from unions, as things like precinct committee people. That has a long-term impact on who gets selected to run. But uh, there's there's um, there's a lot of tensions here. I would say that
Okay.
the support for Trump is very strong, and so the support for the ultra right is very strong in Indiana. But I don't
What
think it's
about
a majority.
Ohio? Anita,
Yes,
I think we talked a little bit about that last week. Do you think that the Republican candidates are just playing to the Republican base and that they'll be able to move over to the center in the general election? Or have they
I hope.
moved?
Let's
You
see.
hope so?
I think there's two different state races in Ohio, statewide races. The Senate and the governor. The governor is an incumbent Republican, and he might be a little harder to beat. But we have Nan Whaley running for governor, and she is really going to protect women's right to bodily autonomy. But I think Tim Ryan, I think the Senate is so important this year. It's just crucial that we do everything we can to make sure that the fascist right does not take control of the Senate. Or things will really reverse quickly for the working class and for our chances for better working class autonomy and unity in the future. So I think, I mean, we're going to really, hope and work on behalf of defeating J.D. Vance, who is one of these. I missed the discussion of replacement theory, but he wants to. He believes in that kind of a racist theory that goes back to the early 1900s in France. So he's convinced that the Democratic Party wants to replace the electorate. The Democratic Party doesn't need to replace its electorate because it's won the popular vote in the presidential elections ever since 2004. The Republicans are the ones whose majority is or whose voters are shrinking. So I think they'll still try to ramp up the fear and the demagoguery and the banning of the books. But I think Ohio voters have a chance of seeing through that rhetoric and doing the right thing.
Rosanna, two really important things happened over the last few weeks. Number one was the leaking of that document by Justice Alito banning abortion, and the other was that terrible, terrible massacre in Buffalo. Do you think that that's going to motivate Rosanna, the Democratic with a small D electorate, to come out, or are people just disgusted and saying, no matter what I do, no matter what I try, nothing helps. I'm just gonna stay home. What do you think?
I think it's a little hard to tell right now, but I'm hoping that it really does motivate enough folks to get out and stand up against these acts, stand up against this repression. Um, but I don't know. For me, it's a little difficult to tell whether it really has motivated folks or not. There is some actions, but I think people need to take it a lot more seriously because this is really important.
Eric, there's a train of thought out there that says voting. Okay, we have voted, and it still hasn't worked. I mean, we got your party, Eric, the Democratic Party, that has the House, it has the Senate, it has the presidency. You got 80% of the people support the right to choose, and these judges just do whatever the heck they want. So something else has to happen in addition to voting. I mean, don't you think it's time to up the ante a little bit, Eric? And if
I think
so, what is that going to look like?
I think that we have already seen the upping of the ante with the uh, street movements around police killings, where people are coming out and making strong demands. But I, I want to speak to this a little bit differently. I want to just say, in Indiana, for instance, and across the country, there's been a lot of um, relatively spontaneous outpourings of uh, struggle against seeing abortion and women's health, uh, seeing access to abortion services and women's health services removed. Um, there's really a huge movement in the Democratic areas of Indiana, which are the more populous areas. So what happens is a ongoing, long-term, multi-decade attack on democracy by the Republicans to undermine the idea that people can affect change through electoral struggle. So that can only be countered by huge movements, huge amounts of voter registration, getting new voters out there, and the movements, when they do win elections, have to keep the pressure on because there's going to be a lot of counter pressures to anybody who's centrist or progressive that gets elected to move to the right and try to expand their electoral base that way. And we have to really say no to that. We have to really insist on maintaining these movements independent of the electoral wins so that there's a understanding that we don't win by having somebody elected. We win by building a movement that actually gets things done. And that to get things done, we have to force or pressure our elected officials so that they need the numbers. They need to be able to say, we've got 90% of my people or 75% of my people want this. I cannot vote against it. And that's the point that we have to arrive at from my perspective.
So Anita, Eric is arguing is that the problem isn't having elections, and the problem isn't having strikes, and the problem isn't having sit-ins. He's arguing that we got to do it um, uh, more earnestly for longer periods of time. Uh, that the problem is not uh, pressure, but that the pressure is temporary and that it has to be constant. But how do you maintain that?
Wow, that's a well, it's, it's that way of putting it. Really, I'm not sure, but I think he's right. We do have to really make it so that politicians cannot say no to us. You know, they just cannot say no, and of course they can always say no. Kirsten Sinema, the majority of her constituents wanted her to support the bill to reduce the price of drugs, prescription drugs, but she thumbed her nose at them because her donations are pouring in from the pharmaceutical companies. So I think we have to fight against money in politics at every stage, and we just have to take to the streets. I don't know, I missed a little bit of our conversation this morning, but I don't know if you mentioned that Saturday, in addition to that horrible event, that came off of a day of protest. And in Columbus, we had 1,000 or more people on the street, and they were angry about the prospect of Roe being overturned. And I think that if we can keep up that momentum, that strikes, one in every four women has had an abortion or will have had an abortion in her life. And I think we're not going to be able to stand for taking that right that's been with us for 50 years away from us. So I think that might be an issue that really we're going to stand firm on.
Well, I hope so. I hope so. And Rosanna, but I think that one of the big problems is that it's you can't be on alert 24/7. You know, um, I always remember the slogan of the Grenadian Revolution: "Forward ever, backward never." But you can't go forward all the time. I mean, you gotta take a step back every now and then. So I guess that the solution is just to be vigilant and to keep the pressure on as much as possible. Rest and then come back and fight it another day. What do you think?
I yeah, I agree. I think that's part of it. I think experience also helps in understanding and not fall prey to some of this language that's being used that maybe like sounds good, but in reality, it's not. And so I think sometimes just the experience of being out there, standing up against these issues, continue to put that pressure on, and definitely you got to take a step back so that you make sure that you're on the right path.
Well, Mr. Biden got on the right path this week when his administration decided to relax some of the restrictions on Cuba. The remittances, the money that people send every month, I think has been increased. They had a cap on it, so that was very positive. And now it will be easier for people to travel back and forth. Uh, Not as easy as it was during the Obama years, but a little bit easier. So I'm hopeful, Anita, that this is signaling a shift in position, a more permanent one on the part of the administration, because after they had those demonstrations in Cuba last summer, they decided to tighten everything up.
Hmm.
That doesn't seem to be working, and so now they're switching gears again. Why don't they just drop the goddamn embargo?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And the State Department tried to arrange for some demonstrations to take place in November, but they fell through because Cubans weren't on the same page. But I think these are interesting changes. The increasing remittances is a good thing. It has a little bit of a double-edged sword effect in Cuba because by increasing the number of dollars that can go from the United States to Cuban relatives of those Americans who are doing well, you end up favoring those white Cubans, for example, whose relatives were fled the revolution and now they have, car dealerships in Miami and they're making lots of money and they can send money back to their relatives, and that increases inequality within Cuba. So it's good, but it has some drawbacks. Issuing visas is a really good thing. I think that's the next thing they really need to do is ease up on this issuing of visas, because ordinary Cubans, they have to go to a third country and stay there 10 days in order to apply for a visa. It's just impossible. So, and as far as Cuban travel, I went to Cuba a couple of times during the Trump administration. Never had a problem. Never was asked any questions on my way back. I tried this morning to get a flight from Orlando to Havana, and it's there, no problem. It's a little more expensive than it used to be. So I don't know what's stopping people from visiting. I'm not sure how I haven't heard of anybody getting fined for visiting. There's just a list of hotels and stores you're not supposed to shop from, but I think it's really hard for the United States to really make a problem with that. So I think, I mean, the more people go to Cuba who can go, just get on the airlines and go and have a great time. It's a wonderful place to visit, and they really need visitors there to shore up the economy, which was really dependent on tourism and got hit hard by the pandemic.
And you have the last word. Thank you, Anita. Eric, thanks for joining us. Rosanna, we'll see you on Monday. We want to wish everybody a great weekend. Stay strong, stay safe, stay in the fight. Take care, everybody.
Thanks, Joe. Bye bye, everybody.